So I'm so excited today to bring you a very special interview. It's the second time this special guest has come on the podcast. And I'm Rachel, and I'm here talking to my sister, Megan Lloyd, about her new book. This is very exciting, called Building Books. This is our third book. And Megan, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, we didn't get you on for the last book, Fort Building Time. We had you on for Finding Wild, but what an accomplishment! 3 books.
Yeah, I'm so excited. It still feels a little surreal.
Yeah, I bet. All those years that you're writing about, it took you about 8-9 years before you had writing?
It took like 12 years.
12 years, yeah, before you got one. Did you ever think that you would become a children's book, a picture? I don't know if these are called picture books. What's the classification? Sure. Okay.
I hoped I would, but I think there's really just no guarantees. All you can do is work your hardest and hope you have a little bit of luck too. So I hoped I would, but I didn't know if it was going to work out. So I'm really glad it did.
Yeah. Did you were always wanted to be a writer since you were little, correct?
Yes. I found some old diaries recently, and I found an entry I wrote when I was 8, and I said that when I grow up, I want to write children's books.
Oh my gosh.
So
that's so cute. Remember reading like particular picture books that you really liked? That's good.
Oh yeah, so many. It's hard to know where to start. Let's see. I loved Tales from the Brambley Hedge books by Jill Barlow. Yeah. Those are British, and not as many Americans have read them. Somehow we had them, and those, I just loved those. I loved books with really detailed illustrations that you could kind of pore over. Yeah. I love Jan Brett's books, what's it called? Annie and the Wild Animals. That was one of my favorites.
The Mitten one.
Yeah, the Mitten.
Yeah, that was really good. I forgot about her.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also remember, what's the one, Tasha Tudor?
Oh yeah, Tasha Tudor, A Time to Keep. That was that one I loved. And that one, there's actually a reference to that in my book, Fort Building Time, when they're taking a cake down the river. And in A Time to Keep by Tasha Tudor, then the birthday cake like floats down the river on this raft, and I thought that was like the coolest thing of all time.
Yeah. All 3 of your books are kind of about imaginative play. And I guess as a mom with 3 girls, that must be something you can kind of relate to.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's something that's really important to me is creativity and exploration. And yeah, just using your imagination, and especially for kids, like having that freedom and that space in their childhood.
Yeah. Do you think that's something we've lost in our society? That's a problem?
I mean, it definitely, I think there's less of it because of technology.
Yeah.
And if you're just doing, and I don't think there's anything wrong with kids watching TV or playing video games or whatever, but you also, want them to have that time where they're really bored and they have to think of things to do, and be creative, and also just play outside and be a little freer.
Yeah. I think that we have kind of lost the idea that just unstructured, whether you're an adult or a child, like unstructured time is a waste of time. That we have to be doing something, we have to be, we have to be scheduled, and otherwise it's just wasting time. Where for kids, that's really important, is to just play and to be imaginative, and certainly in schools you get very little of that, and then we got to structure and have all the scheduled time into their other time, so they might have 20 minutes of just unstructured play in a day, which is a shame sometimes.
Yeah, I do think it's really important for kids and for adults to have that time when they don't feel so pressured to produce some certain result or do some specific thing. But and I think it's just good for your mind, relieves the anxieties and things like that.
Yeah. So for this book, you worked with this latest book called Building Books. And how did you get the inspiration for writing this particular book?
I haven't thought of my answer to this question yet. I need to have something. This is one of those ones you always get asked. Let's see. I'm trying to remember. I don't know.
Well, maybe that was too broad of a question.
I need to think of an answer for this, but I can't remember. I wrote this one a while ago, actually. Like, I did the first draft, maybe 5 years ago or something. And I don't remember what sparked it.
Well, you have one.
When I was a kid, I loved building things. I loved Legos. I loved doing that, and I loved reading. So I know it comes from me as a kid, but I don't remember what made me think of writing it down.
Well, you have one sibling who doesn't like to read, and the other sibling loves to read. Yeah. And the one sibling kind of thinks the reading is boring. And so, I think that's a real true thing. I definitely can relate to that, because I didn't learn how to read until I was a little bit older. I think I was 7, which isn't unheard of, but it was certainly older than the kindergartner teachers I had, that they wanted 100% reading on everybody by the end of kindergarten. And that wasn't going to happen for me. And I think that some kids can feel I think some kids can be kind of bored with reading. And I remember Mom talking about Sam and how he was really bored with reading. And then she got him to read the Hardy Boys, and he got really into it. And she was like, well, why do you like this and not these other books? And she's like, he said something to the fact of, well, those books are boring.
Yeah, totally. And even in Building Books, then one of the books she's being forced to read, and she's trying to read, you can see the title in the illustration, and it's called Boring.
Yeah.
So I think, kids, I think really young, they can start to label themselves as either a bookworm or not.
Yeah.
Because there'll be some kids who are super into reading, and they get a lot of positive feedback about that from teachers and parents and stuff. And then there'll be other kids, and they're just not loving every book, so they can get labeled, I think, as someone who doesn't love reading. But I think lots of times there are books out there that those kids will like, and it's not, maybe they just have pickier taste, or maybe they really like reading nonfiction and they don't really like fiction. And so I think that's something I tried to incorporate into Building Books is the girl, Katie, who loves building. She doesn't learn to fall in love with reading until she finds a book that's really geared towards her interests. And I think that happens a lot of times with kids. Maybe they want to read a lot of cookbooks. You never know, kids will gravitate towards kind of random things that you wouldn't think of. That when you think of a bookworm or a kid who's into reading, you think of them reading big series like Harry Potter and stuff. But there's going to be other kids who would love to read, but they just maybe need to explore some more types of books to find the books that are just right for them.
Yeah, I totally agree with that because they might just like to read comic books or graphic novels. And there used to be this whole, I feel like it's mostly gone, but there's this whole idea that like, oh, comic books aren't real reading. But
Mhm.
maybe like the kid is a more of a visual uh learner and
Yeah,
story, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, especially in this modern day of graphic novels and comics and things like that. And also maybe they're more of a movie person, and so that can kind of like inspire them to then be more interested in the books. I think sometimes can happen.
totally. And I love graphic novels, and I love that this has become way more of a thing in kids' books, because I think a lot of times kids will love picture books, but then they're expected to go from picture books straight to like these thick fantasy novels, which I also love, by the way, but it can be overwhelming. And then graphic novels, it's like has this, there's all the illustrations, but they can have really complex themes and like high vocabulary as well. And so
Yeah.
it's like this great space between those two that wasn't being filled. And not that I think it should just be like, oh, you go from one thing to another. I think you can just keep going back and forth. I mean, I know tons of adults who love to read picture books, and I had a high school teacher message me once about using one of my picture books, Finding Wild, in her classroom. So I mean, I think it's great to view them not as like age groups so much, but just something we can like always continue to enjoy in different ways.
Yeah, and I like the fact that this book, that's the girl that's struggling with the reading, because I feel like, I don't know if it's just because uh, you're more likely to be on the spectrum as a boy than a girl, but I feel like in media it's always the girl who's sort of, I call the enlightened reader, and then the boy who's not into reading, and you've got like your Hermione's and characters like that. There's so many. And so I kind of like that in this case it's the girl who likes to do the building and the boy who likes to do the reading.
Yeah, I mean, one thing, so as a mom of daughters, one thing that's really important to me in my writing is I always try to um, like show girls in ways that maybe I'm not seeing as much, but which seem really realistic to me as a parent. So I'm not trying to do like reactionary or like a new stereotype of girls. I'm just trying to show girls in a way that I think is actually true to life, but
Mhm.
is not being portrayed as much.
Yeah, I think that's really good.
Like, I mean, when I was a kid, I have so many memories of building things with Legos, and then I never built like the sets. It was always just like free play with Legos. Uh,
Yeah,
and then I love to read.
it's
So,
probably because they got like dumped out, and so it's
oh
like,
yeah, it was always like the big jumbled box.
yeah, that is really funny. So you got to work with a different illustrator this time than your other two books. What was that like?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was great. It was fun seeing something totally different, because for my first two books, yeah, I worked with the same illustrator, Abigail Halpin, and then this book, Building Books, is illustrated by Brienne Farley. So it was fun to see a totally different style and approach. This one has a lot more like white space and like vignettes kind of. Uh,
Uh-huh.
and she has it. I love the like humorous details she put in there, and it really suits the style of the story. So yeah, I mean, it was great. When you're the author of a picture book, you don't do a lot of work directly with the illustrator. It's kind of like your editor is kind of between you. Um, but but I was really happy with her work and with everything I saw.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really fun. I really, I agree with you about the little kind of Easter eggs, but kind of hidden,
Yeah,
like you said, the
it's
titles of the
fun.
books.
Yeah, it's
It was
fun.
really fun.
And those are the things I feel like I appreciated when I was a kid, because you're really pouring over. I mean, one thing that you have to think about when you're writing for kids is that adults don't necessarily reread books very often, but a kid might reread a book like 50 times.
Right. That's very true.
So all those little details or different things, they'll really notice those, because they'll just, if they, they have a favorite book, and they'll just go read it again and again and again.
How do you, I guess we're going to dive a little bit into just sort of general books, but how do you feel as a mother and just a writer when you read the books that you liked as a kid, but they don't hold up at all?
Well, usually like the picture books I loved when I was a kid, then I read them and I still love them as much. But I can't even think of a picture book where that happened to me. But with novels, definitely some that I loved as a kid, I've reread as an adult and was like, what? Like, I'm not quite sure what I was seeing in that. Or
I tell you one for me. Girl of the Limberlost.
Oh yeah, I reread that one as an adult too, and I was like, okay.
So bad. It's terrible.
Like the nature writing, like the descriptions, were still appealing and stuff, but like the plot and the characters just seemed so dated. Like I just could not get into it.
Yeah, the romance is really bad. The relationship between the mother and daughter, which I thought was so great as a kid, is kind of terrible. And it's just super soapy.
Yeah, it was really over the top. And
really over the top and really terrible. And I like a little bit of soap in my writing sometimes, but it's just, and the romance at the end is terrible. And it's just like, oh wow. Like, the other interesting thing to me is stuff that, like, because I wasn't a big fantasy person, so it probably doesn't happen to me as much as it happens to other people, but particularly with Roald Dahl. And when I read it as an adult, it's such a different experience as when I was a kid.
You're like,
because like as a kid, I remember thinking they were so funny and so whimsical, and I really enjoyed them. But as an adult, I found them kind of shocking. Like, first of all, like almost all the women in his books are just beasts and terrible. There are a few, Miss Honey, a few exceptions.
Funny.
Yeah, but the Trunchbull, the ants and James the Giant Peach, the witches, of course. There were so many, and I just decided to be reading, and I was like, wow, were the nuns super mean to him growing up? Like, what is going on? And they're just kind of like what seemed whimsical to me as a kid, to me kind of was bordering on mean-spiritedness as an adult. And I'm like, I don't know.
Kids like dark humor a lot of times, more than like people think. They'll really like those. And they, I don't know, they kind of get that it's supposed to be funny, even though it's pretty dark.
Like, I remember thinking that Boy, his biography about his childhood, was so charming and so funny. But as an adult reading it, I'm just like, it's one caning after another. Like, it's
really sad.
Yeah, and as a parent, I think I would be a little conflicted about do I recommend this because do I recommend it as the kid me, or do I recommend it with caution as the adult me? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think kids can read that and be fine. I mean, I think if you're concerned about something like that in a kid's book, like, then maybe you read it also and try to open a conversation about things. Like, use it as a means of dialogue instead of like restricting it.
Yeah.
That's more my approach.
It's just it was a weird, very weird experience. And the other thing I think is so strange is that I feel like this is more young adult, but when we were growing up, like there wasn't even young adult as like a thing. There was like Judy Blume and like
there was like the Outsiders.
Yeah. And it's so crazy.
Yeah, it's not like there was this section in the bookstore. It was just like the kids' books or something. There were a few like older titles. Yeah, it's a really new area of the market.
Yeah, it's so weird how something can just bloom overnight. Like when I was in high school, I remember reading Tom Clancy.
Oh yeah, totally. And
John Grisham.
Yeah, I remember that. And I was doing the same thing. I was just going straight to adult books.
Yeah.
Still reading some like younger kids stuff, sometimes for like comfort read kind of, or like rereading Anne of Green Gables type thing. But then, by the time I was 14, reading like random John Grisham books, and more like literary fiction too, like Hemingway or things, just it was like that's what you read next, or Jane Austen,
Yeah.
You didn't really have. So it probably lost a lot of readers because the like reading difficulty and like the fun of the stories like all of a sudden really went downhill.
Yeah,
good books, but like a lot of really sober content and like not as many like adventure tale type things.
What do you think really turned the corner and started YA?
You had like Harry Potter, which is technically kids, but basically the last, once you get to book 4, like he becomes a teenager. Like I think if it had just been those books, they would have been put in YA. So you have Harry Potter becoming the huge hit through different ages, and then you had Twilight and Hunger Games also. So then and then it was, I think that really set things off because they're like, oh, books about teenagers, everyone's loving them.
Yeah, because there were definitely dystopians and things like that, like obviously Wrinkle in Time would probably be considered YA now, and The Giver. Those are both books for children.
They've aged. I think the characters are still pretty young in them. I can't remember, but they would have to be written differently now to be YA.
Well, The Giver, I think definitely would. Jonas is a teenager.
Is he a teenager? I can't remember. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a teenager.
Yeah, you can kind of see like the groundwork being laid, but yeah, it wasn't really a separate market like that.
And I think Meg is like 12, maybe?
Yeah, A Wrinkle in Time still seems kind of younger.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's just funny to me that now
it's interesting
thing. But what are some of your favorite? You say, I guess, kids books. However you want to qualify it. What's one that you particularly like?
Okay, well, I talked about some of my older favorites from when I was little, so maybe some more recent ones. A recent picture book I really liked is A Different Pond. That's a really good one, kind of about a boy and his father who go fishing, and it's kind of an immigration story because they're Vietnamese refugees, so they're fishing each morning early to get for food, not for recreation. And so that was a really cool one that I think really successfully showed like a deeper topic. One of my favorite like silly picture books is Goldilocks and the Three Dinosaurs by Mo Willems.
Oh, okay.
Just hilarious. And then another really funny one, I think, is The Summer Nick Taught His Cats to Read by Curtis Manley. That one actually would go really well with building books because it's kind of about learning to read. But it's really funny because he really does teach his cats successfully to read.
Oh.
So those are some picture books off the top of my head. There's so many good picture books coming out all the time.
I really enjoy is Rapunzel by Paul Zielinski. I think all of his, I think he does a really good job with all of his books and the illustrations.
Yeah, those ones. And what does he have? He has another fairy tale in that style. Like,
yeah, he's Rumpelstiltskin, which I really like.
Yeah, in the old, like, oh, I'm no artist.
I'm sorry.
Style. That's really cool. It looks like an old mural in like a fancy old building.
Yeah. It has a medieval quality to it.
Yeah.
I like some of the classics of Madeline. I think the Madeline books are really good. Yeah. I think the Angelina Ballerina books are really good.
I loved those when I was growing up.
Yeah. And I love Winnie the Pooh. I think Winnie the Pooh's great. A. Milne. And I really like Where the Wild Things Are. Mm-hmm. And I absolutely love that movie, although it's not really for kids. Yeah. And I really like, your classic, like The Hungry Caterpillar and Goodnight Moon. I think are really good. And then another fun one that I like is The Paper Bag Princess. Have you ever read that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one's a fun one.
Fun. Two others I really like that I feel like I don't hear about as much. One author illustrator I love is Elisa Clevin. She has a ton of picture books, and they're all really kind of art and creativity focused. There's one called The Paper Princess about, this princess doll made out of paper who gets blown away in the wind and has all these adventures. They're just like really sweet and imaginative. And then another author illustrator I love, who is a Swedish one from like the 1920s around, Elsa Beskow, and she has just like, her illustrations are so pretty and they're just really sweet. Like there's this one called The Sun Egg, and an orange falls out of the kid's lunchbox in the forest, and then all the little like forest creatures think it's like an egg from the sun. They're like waiting for the sun egg to hatch, and they're also like intrigued with it.
I haven't heard of that one. I like one called No David. I think that one's cute.
Yeah, those ones are great. They have such a like kid energy to them.
Yeah. And there's a lot of good ones at Christmas, since Christmas is coming up before we know it.
Yeah, I love Christmas picture books. I have like a huge collection, and I put them around my tree and everything.
Yeah. The Polar Express.
Yeah.
And books like that, I think, are really good. Remember that we used to have those books on tape? There were like dramatic books on tape of classics. Like we had a 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Oh yeah, I do.
And a Jane Eyre.
Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah. And some people might balk at that as like, you're giving abridged versions or whatever to kids, but I think it was great. It definitely inspired me, and to read some of those harder books. I mean, I think that Wishbone was brilliant at that. I mean, that was a little after my time, but being a little kid, but still, I think it's a great way to sort of introduce kids to really, to hard books and make them see why they might be fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think it can really, catch someone's interest, and, maybe they will read the real version someday, or maybe they won't, but it's not like all adults have read all of the classics anyway, so it's okay.
Yeah, nobody's read everything. Yeah, I remember because The Little Women, it was a illustrated version, so it was like especially thick and big, and
I remember exactly the one. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just remember I read it and Beth died and it was so
Yeah.
sad.
Yeah, I think a lot of kids now get that feeling from reading as the Harry Potter books get thicker.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
okay, I read book 4. Like I read the
Yeah.
first thick one, The Doorstopper, and like you read the whole series. It's like reading status symbol.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember as a kid, a lot of the stuff that other people liked, like I'm not convinced that I would have liked Harry Potter that much. I don't think I would have hated
Yeah,
it.
you didn't really like fantasy like that.
No, I didn't like fantasy. I just couldn't connect with it. And at least like Harry Potter, it's sort of set in our world, and so I can connect with it a little better. Like I didn't like Wrinkle in Time until I was older, and
Yeah,
I didn't like Lord of the Rings until I was older,
yeah,
like in college.
yeah.
And I don't know. I just connected more with something like Little Women that was more grounded in like characters I could relate to a little bit better than these fantasy worlds.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, the lucky thing for kids today is that the children's book market has just grown. So there's just so many different types of books. I just think there's like something for every type of kid now.
Yeah, which is really cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely, I mean, Anna Green Gables will always be, especially that first book, will always be the gold standard to me. It's just such a beautiful character. I remember there's a quote by Mark Twain where he talks about how Anne is just a brilliant character, and you can certainly include Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn as in this sort of in that kind of discussion. I feel like, and they're great. And I don't know. I connected with Anne and her imagination, her desire for friendship, and a bosom friend. That was something I was in kindred spirits, and all
Yeah.
of that. And it's interesting. I did a review of this brilliant show called Hilda on Netflix right now that I absolutely loved so much. And it was interesting because I had said that I thought it was really creative. And somebody in the comments section was like, how can you say it's creative? And most of the stuff is set in like her bedroom and blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, well, I mean, it was very unexpected. And there were like levels of world building and like, I didn't know where it was going. And I think there's this idea that in order for something to have to be creative, it has to be, and Hilda in fairness does have other worlds and does have fantasy elements, but that it has to be like this, that everything has to be Tolkien or something like that. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that you can be creative in ordinary settings, but like with Anne, where she would turn Barry's Pond into the Lake of Shining Waters. To me, that's creative.
Yeah, totally. I think there's a way to be creative, like no matter what genre you're writing in.
Yeah. Another one that I have a fondness for, and I haven't read them in a long time, so maybe they don't hold up at all, but I definitely remember really enjoying The Babysitter's Club.
Oh my gosh, I loved the Babysitter's Club. I have a funny Babysitter's Club story. Like, I loved them so much. And then I decided, I don't know how old I was, but I decided I was too old for them. Like, it seemed like no one else was like loving the Babysitter's Club, my age. So I felt embarrassed, like they were babyish. So I sold them all at a yard sale we had to like our neighbor, because there was like a girl a little bit younger than me. But then I would secretly check them out from the library because I didn't want to stop reading them.
That's so funny. Like, I wish I had.
I love them.
I wish I had them all now.
I know. I loved Nancy Drew. That was another one.
Yeah. Nancy Drew, Ramona.
But I never sold my Nancy Drew one, thank goodness.
Yeah. Ramona is really sweet and funny.
Ramona's so good, and there's really good audiobooks of Ramona.
Oh, yeah?
Ramona is the best to listen to as a parent because it's like a master class in parenting. Because like you hear all like her thought process and it all like makes so much sense to her. And you're like, oh, okay, they are making sense to themselves, even though their behavior seems totally random to me.
Yeah. That's really cool. Yeah, I also, some others that I really enjoyed, the Mixed Up Files of Miss Basil E. Frankweiler, that definitely made my short list.
It's a great one to read before you go to New York.
Yeah. I loved The Boxcar Children. That was up there. I think the idea, I was very independent, as you well know, and the whole idea of these kids, you know, like making their own world and making it their own or whatever is very great for a kid.
Yeah, the Boxcar Children, they totally have that like New England Puritan work ethic. They're like, now we'll make this dinner from the apples we picked and the bread we got.
Yeah.
Charlotte's Web, that's definitely one of my
favorites. Yeah, good one. Really good one.
That one I loved when I was a kid. I still love it if I read it. It's just like, that's just like a perfect kid's book.
Yeah. I also loved Cheaper by the Dozen.
Oh my gosh, I remember.
I still love it. Not the terrible movie adaptation that's not even an adaptation at all.
I've never seen it.
Just by name only. I just love I love those two parents so much. I love this whole huge family and I think it's so funny and I think it's so sweet and I still just love it. And I would love if like we did get there are movies made, I think in the 60s, 50s or 60s with Clifton Webb, and those are pretty good. But I would love a modern, new, correct adaptation to be made someday. But I just really I love that book. That's definitely a comfort read for me.
Yeah. I think it's funny, but I couldn't imagine. I don't know. I think I would go lose my mind in that family.
Yeah, because
all his projects and stuff kind of overwhelming, and his personality seems so overwhelming.
Yeah, I remember The Indian in the Cupboard I liked. I haven't read that in a while, so I don't know if it holds up. That would have been kind of maybe a little YA. I can't remember how. And Watership Down, that was something I liked in high school.
Yeah, I remember really liking Watership Down. But I mean, isn't Watership Down, I think, is considered an adult book.
Is it? Okay. We read it in high school, which is really feels random. A random book to read in high school. I like The Westing Game. That's a fun book if you want to introduce kids to like a detective story, I feel like.
Yeah.
Together. Pretty fun. Oh, and I also loved if you want to introduce kids to a little bit of a horror vibe, scary. Peppermints in the Parlor was one that I really liked.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. You don't like it?
No, I loved it when I was a kid. I haven't read it since, but I remember I thought that was just so chilling.
Yeah. The ones that I loved, you got your weepers, like Where the Red Fern Grows. It's like, I guess Little Women is too. Little Princess. Books like that.
A book I read recently that had that kind of classic, sad yet happy, old-fashioned vibe was The Secret Horses of Briar Hill by Megan Wagner. That was good. That was a recent one that kind of tapped into that old-timey feeling. That one was really good. Oh, a Christmas book that we were talking about Christmas books earlier. There's a Christmas kids book that my family loved. It's a chapter book called Top Elf. They're having like kind of like a reality style show contest to choose the next Santa. And the main character is so cute and funny. Just like his narration and his character, you just want to like hug him. That's a fun Christmas read.
Yeah, that sounds really cute. Well, this has been really fun. I really have enjoyed talking with you about books. So everybody should check out Megan's 3 books, particularly her new book, Building Books. And I know you don't have social media right now, but do you have like a website or a place where people can?
So I have a website, meganwagnerlloyd.com, and I'm on Instagram.
That's right, Instagram.
At Megan Wagner Lloyd.
Great. Well, I will put that in the description. And let us know what your favorite books were growing up, what you like to read, what your kids like to read, what you do to encourage them to read, all of that fun stuff. We would love to hear in the comment section. That would be really fun. And if you want to follow the podcast, please follow the podcast on iTunes and on SoundCloud. Check that out. And here on YouTube. And let us know what you think. Give us your reviews on iTunes. It's very helpful to help more people find out about the podcast. And thanks so much, Megan. This was really fun. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was really fun chatting with you.
Yeah, no problem. And we will have to talk again soon.
Yeah, sounds good.
And I'll have a link in the description if people want to purchase the book as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. We'll talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.